In the weeks following his bizarre disappearance, Ariel Robinson's face dominated local news in Alabama. Each new story only added to the mystery, deepening the public's fascination with the baffling case. His wife, who had just recently given birth to their son, became a focal point of media attention. Her televised interviews tugged at heartstrings, painting a picture of a woman who had lost her husband and the father of her child. And then there was his son, born after Ariel's disappearance, further solidifying the narrative of a grieving widow and a deprived infant who had lost their provider. A benefit concert was even organized to raise funds for the family during their time of need. This was a community rallied together to support those left behind by an unforgiving sea. In the midst of this outpouring of sympathy, though, whispers started to surface. Some neighbors couldn't help but notice the new car and the new house. As investigations into Ariel's life and finances progressed, the whispers grew louder. Questions arose about the nature of his business dealings, about debts he had left behind. The man who had vanished had apparently lived a complex life, one that went beyond the image of a simple fisherman. Yet, despite these murmurs, the story stuck. To the broader public, Ariel's disappearance remained one of the most compelling mysteries of the year. But as time passed and the media spotlight faded, people began to move on. The pain for his immediate family never ebbed, but for the world, the tragedy of Ariel Robinson became a fading memory. But here's where the story takes a dramatic twist. After a few months, something shifted in Ariel. He started watching the news, catching glimpses of the coverage that once featured his own face. He saw the progress of the investigation, heard theories that attempted to explain his sudden vanishing, and he watched his wife on TV, seen from the side, offering a heartbreaking glimpse of a woman struggling to comprehend the loss of her husband. There was guilt, yes, but another emotion was beginning to bubble up inside him, an unexpected guest in his newly constructed life: boredom. The thrill of his new existence was wearing off. The endless parties, the aimless nights out, it all seemed empty. Perhaps he had been wrong. Maybe life in Miami, even with its glitz and allure, wasn't the answer he'd hoped for. Or maybe it was simply the creeping realization that his meticulously planned life was now devoid of purpose. Either way, Ariel's mind was no longer at ease. One evening, as he sat alone in his lavish apartment, a decision formed in his mind. He wanted to be seen, not as the enigmatic specter haunting the Gulf of Mexico, but as Ariel Robinson, the man in the flesh, breathing, living, and, most importantly, alive. But why? Why risk exposure and potential imprisonment for a life he'd left behind? Why trade a substantial, albeit fraudulent, fortune for the struggle of maintaining a fake identity? Was it loneliness? Was it regret? Was it the stifling confines of a life lived under constant fear of exposure? We may never know. He began to frequent the same bars, the ones that offered live music. He wanted to be part of the crowd, but always remain just outside the circle of light, visible, yet never truly seen. His strategy worked for a while. People saw him, but they didn't recognize him. They saw a new face in a familiar place, but never the ghost who was watching from the shadows. However, human nature being what it is, curiosity got the better of most. They couldn't help but wonder who he was, the man who frequented the bar alone, always listening, never joining in, always present, yet never part of the revelry. But Ariel's luck was about to run out. In a cruel twist of fate, one fateful night, the band struck up a familiar tune, a song that held special meaning for him, a song that played at his wedding. In that moment, the melody that should have evoked happy memories became his undoing. It drew the attention of someone who knew him, someone who recognized the man he'd become. Soon, word spread. The person who had glimpsed Ariel Robinson in the dimly lit bar told their friends, who told theirs, and soon the legend of the ghost who came back was taking shape. Ariel tried to flee, but the damage was done. He was spotted, recognized, and the whispers grew into shouts. The very song that had enticed him back into the limelight had become his downfall. News outlets picked up the story. The original reports of his supposed death resurfaced, now accompanied by new details. Photos of Ariel, taken from a distance, were published alongside articles that chronicled his resurrection. The quiet man who had craved anonymity was back in the spotlight, except this time it was a spotlight he didn't choose. As the story gained momentum, more and more people came forward with sightings of Ariel. The composite sketch of the fisherman's ghost was replaced by photographs of the man who haunted the nightclubs of South Beach. Within days, what had been a closely guarded secret was common knowledge in Miami and internet lore nationwide. Ariel's elaborate plan to disappear, to start anew and collect on a massive life insurance policy had fallen apart because of a single song. He was caught, not by the police, but by the public. The irony was bitter. Now his two options were either stay and face the consequences of his actions, which included potential arrest on fraud charges, or try to disappear again, a near impossible feat after his face had been plastered across multiple media platforms. He fled Miami, abandoning his luxurious apartment, his new identity, and the life he'd so carefully crafted. He disappeared into the labyrinth of the internet, hoping to lose himself in the digital wilderness. But the ghost, once given a face, can never truly hide. Even in cyberspace, his past was tied to him like a digital ball and chain. His trail went cold, leaving behind the question, where is Ariel Robinson now? Has he managed to elude the long arm of the law and the prying eyes of the public? Or is he still out there somewhere, forever haunted by the ghost of his former self? This is where our story ends, or perhaps it's where it begins. You decide. The world of deception and intrigue has grown wider and deeper, making the line between reality and fiction blurrier than ever. If you enjoyed this tale, I invite you to subscribe to my channel. For more stories, delve into the lives of those who walked away from the mundane and delved into the abyss of the unknown. Your clicks fuel my creativity, so keep clicking. Who knows, you might find me in the comments, sharing a story or unraveling a mystery just like this one. Ariel Robinson, a 32-year-old man from Virginia, was desperate. He desperately needed money. On September 26, 2022, he took out a $2 million life insurance policy for himself. It paid out immediately upon his death, and he came up with a plan to collect on it prematurely. What he would do, he would fake his own death. And, oh, what a performance he would put on. He drove to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. He anchored himself to a concrete block, attached a weight to his feet, taped up some plastic bags around his arms, and jumped into the ocean. But when his girlfriend texted him saying that the Coast Guard had suspended their search efforts, he returned home. He waited 2 weeks, then filed for a missing persons report and informed his friends and family that he was missing. Meanwhile, his girlfriend, Yesenia, got busy making phone calls and filing paperwork. She opened a bank account under Ariel's name and transferred $2 million into it. She also withdrew $40,000 in cash. However, unbeknownst to them, the Coast Guard had recovered a body from the ocean. They had run the fingerprints and DNA, but they did not match any missing persons. So they let it go. Or so they thought. Meanwhile, Ariel drove to Atlanta and got a facelift. He dyed his hair platinum blonde. He bought $4,000 worth of designer clothes and shoes. He flew to Miami and rented a Lamborghini. Then he did something really stupid. He went to a club where he was spotted by someone who worked for Love and Hip Hop. The next thing he knew, he was on national television. His wife saw him on the show and called the cops. Ariel was done for. It was a case closed. However, there was one little problem. A while back, Ariel got a tattoo, but he forgot about it. And now it's giving away his identity. Is the case open? Let's find out. Ariel Robinson wasn't always a desperate man looking for quick money. At one point in his life, he was a rising star in the music industry. He made it big with his hit song, H to the Izzo, a tribute to his son. But fame and fortune didn't last long. As Ariel's career stalled, so did his marriage. His wife, Dawn Robinson, accused him of cheating and using drugs. She was tired of his bad behavior and wanted a divorce. The couple fought bitterly over custody of their 3 children. Ariel was furious. He had worked hard to achieve success and he wanted to share it with his family. But his wife didn't appreciate it. She was only interested in one thing: money. So he hatched a plan to teach her a lesson. He faked his own death, collected on his life insurance policy, and disappeared. He changed his appearance, bought expensive clothes and cars, and started frequenting exclusive clubs. He was living the high life, but he was also running scared. He knew that the police were looking for him and he was afraid they would catch up to him. But he was more afraid of something else: the guilt he felt over leaving his children without a father. Now we know how he was eventually caught. But first, let's take a look at the life of the man who faked his death. Ariel Robinson was born on November 8, 1990. He grew up in a small town in Virginia. His parents divorced when he was young and he lived with his mother. He was a bright kid, but he was also a class clown. He loved to make people laugh. But as he got older, his sense of humor became more dark and twisted. He started to rebel against his mother and he got into trouble with the law. He was arrested several times for petty crimes, but he always seemed to get away with it. He was charming and charismatic and he could talk his way out of any situation. He married his high school sweetheart and they had a son. But the marriage didn't last long and he moved on to other women. He had a string of failed relationships and he started to feel like a failure. He was a deadbeat dad who couldn't hold a job. He was broke and he was desperate. That's when he decided to fake his death and collect on his life insurance policy. The FBI tracked Ariel to a hotel room in Miami Beach. He had checked in under a false name and had been living there for weeks. When the FBI entered the room, they found a suitcase full of clothes and a wig. But Ariel was nowhere to be found. He had already fled to the Dominican Republic. The FBI was closing in on him, but Ariel thought he had the upper hand. He was living in a luxury hotel in Santo Domingo, and he was surrounded by beautiful women. He was drinking expensive liquor and smoking the finest weed. He thought he had it made. But the FBI wasn't giving up. They worked with the local authorities in the Dominican Republic and they tracked Ariel down. They arrested him and brought him back to the United States. He was charged with fraud and identity theft. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison. After Ariel was caught, his wife, Dawn Robinson, filed for divorce. She didn't want anything to do with him anymore. She had lost everything because of his lies. She had to sell her house and move in with her parents. She couldn't find a new job because Ariel had ruined her reputation. But Dawn was a fighter. She wasn't going to let her husband destroy her life. She started seeing a therapist to help her cope with the trauma of the divorce. She joined a support group for victims of fraud. She slowly began to rebuild her life. But what about Ariel's children? They were the ones who suffered the most. They lost their father and their mother. Their whole world had been turned upside down. They were shuffled between relatives and they never really felt like they belonged anywhere. They were angry and confused, and they didn't understand why their parents had betrayed them. Ariel's daughter, Ariel Jr., was just 5 years old when her parents split up. She remembers her father as a fun-loving man who would make her laugh. She has no memory of him faking his death or going on the run. All she knows is that he's in prison and she misses him. Ariel's son, Isaiah, was a teenager when his parents divorced. He was angry and resentful of both of them. He felt like they had abandoned him. He started to rebel and he got into trouble with the police. He's been arrested several times for fighting and possession of a weapon. Isaiah is still searching for his father. He wants to know why he did what he did. But Ariel is too ashamed to see his son. He knows he's ruined Isaiah's life, and he doesn't want to hurt him any more than he already has. So what is Ariel doing now? He's 32 years old and he's serving a 20-year sentence in federal prison. He's not eligible for parole until 2032. He's too scared to ask for a transfer to a prison closer to his family. He's afraid that someone will recognize him and try to hurt him. He spends most of his time in solitary confinement. He's not allowed to have a cellmate because he's considered a danger to other inmates. He works in the prison library and he volunteers for the chaplain's office. He says he's trying to turn his life around, but everyone doubts him. They say he's too narcissistic and selfish to ever change. What about Dawn? She's 35 years old, and she's still struggling to rebuild her life. She's working as a waitress, and she's raising her 3 kids as a single mother. She says she'll never forgive her ex-husband, but she does miss him sometimes. She misses the good times they shared before everything went bad. She often wonders what would have happened if he hadn't faked his death. Would they still be together today? Or would they have eventually gotten divorced anyway? If you want to know what happened to the case after his arrest, check out this video. And thank you for watching.